So she has wonderful things to present to us tonight. I hope you'll give her your full attention, and we'll let you take it away, Jackie.
Thank you. Obviously, we're going to be talking about technology. Some of you were here, I think, last time when I was here, so that's awesome. We're going to be, feel free to ask questions or make comments. We're going to be talking about just the use of technology with our families, and, it's not so much if it's good or bad or, exact science in terms of how much time kids should have, but we can just kind of review, and you guys can maybe chime in too on what you're seeing. Because I know you guys probably, would you say your families have been impacted by technology use? Yeah. So it is, and it's funny, we sometimes we host these movies. There's actually a new Screenagers movie out now, but we'll host these movies with families sometimes, and the parents are always like, can you help us get our kids off screens? And the kids are always like, can you help us get our parents off screens? Because the kids are reporting that a lot of the adults they feel like are distracted, and so we don't always realize it, but as parents, we're taking a call or we're working or we're doing something, and our kids are noticing that too. So it's interesting from their perspective what they're noticing just in terms of accessing the adults that they're trying to talk to. And so like I had shared before, I work with a lot of different school districts in Illinois, and I consult on just different things in terms of their social emotional curriculum interventions, as well as when kids are struggling, I partner with the districts to, support students who are struggling. And so a lot of the conversations we have is just about helping, the resiliency, emotional health, and technology is one that comes up. And again, really good. There's some amazing things that have come out of it. And then there's some things, because technology goes so fast, like we're not always able to catch up. Like I can't tell you how many high school kids from neighboring high schools in the last couple of weeks have told me, and this is like that they are cheating their way through things. And so it's interesting. I think we all have to catch up and figure out kind of how to access things, because kids have watches and they have iPads and they have phones and they have earbuds in their ear, and it's a lot with the AI and stuff like that. And so it's interesting to hear them talk about this because they do feel like it's working for them. And in some ways, when you start using some of this technology, you are like, wow, this is a lot easier for me. I don't have to do like the legwork. So we're having conversations, but so there are really good uses. And there are things that we have to watch out for. Like I said to you last time, I have my own children, and they're adults. They're 25 and 26. So luckily I was not like when my kids were in middle school, phones were just really coming out in terms of, they were more like the flip phone with, it was a little bit different. So I've got to see it from both perspectives of the impact it has when it's used correctly. Welcome. I know I did this to you guys last time. Just wanted to check in. Where are you guys feeling tonight?
Probably
A 6?
Yeah.
That's not terrible. An 8, okay. Kids love these things. 4, okay. At least no one's a 5. No fun. I do this with teachers a lot too, when I do presentations with teachers too, and we laugh about it too, because we always talk about, like, if you're not aware of what's going on with you, you're not going to be aware of your reaction. So as parents, I did this a lot, and this is the one thing that helped me, is if I knew I was at like a 5, or if I knew I was just not in a good place, maybe a 9, I was really, really careful, like how I reacted to my kids. And if it meant I had to just not deal with an issue, I didn't deal with the issue. But I was really careful that I knew if I was like really upset or stressed out, I really tried not to say anything to my children, because I knew I would be easily set off, or I would be quick to react. And so I would just keep walking away when I knew I was pretty, because you're not going to win an argument when you're in that place. And I do remember one time I was so mad at my daughter. She wasn't responding to me when she did get a phone. She wasn't responding to my text messages. And I'm like, you have a phone for one reason, to get a hold of me. I think she was like in 8th grade. But then I Snapchatted her or did something on one of those apps and she got right back to me. And it's interesting when you think about, it was a learning opportunity for me because I realized, one, she doesn't message whatever, she doesn't text, but she used whatever app it was that the kids were using. I think it was something like Snapchat or something, that because I realized, and I really had to learn about all the stuff that was on their devices because it was hard for me because some of it was foreign for me. And so I had to be really aware of understanding what they were doing and what they were seeing and what they were being exposed to, because some of that is a foreign world. And if we're not really careful about understanding what they're doing, then they can be getting in trouble and we don't realize that. We can touch on a little bit of that tonight. Just touching a little bit, I get asked this question a lot. Is my child old enough to have a device? Is my child old enough to be on screens? What is the proper age? The biggest thing that we're going to touch on, it's not so much what age. Does your child have certain skill sets to be able to handle like technology unsupervised? Does your child have certain skill sets to be able to handle like apps and things like that? And so part of it is just making sure, it's not should they have it or should they not, but making sure that your child's, growing and maturing in an emotional way. And I'll explain that a little bit. We're going to talk about some different types, how it can impact mental health. Tech addiction is a big one I treat, and it's treated a lot with kids that also struggle with ADHD and anxiety. I have both girls and boys and, in the middle and adults, and just talking a little bit about kind of some boundaries that might be helpful. And maybe you guys can share with each other some things that you have found helpful. Any questions? And I know that it is not easy to put boundaries around our kids around technology. That is probably the hardest thing that I have to help with. That's the hardest thing. Like, I know that's not easy. I don't ever tell a parent, I just want you to remove the device, or just tell them not to do that, or just take the device away. I don't say it like that because I know in a lot of situations it can blow up. Like, these are not easy things. And I know these conversations aren't easy. So as we're talking to them tonight, like, trust me, I get the gravity there. I had to update this a little bit because this is always changing, honestly, but I'm always learning. And there's some new ones that did not make the list. I wanted to see it. Do you guys know? Do you know some of you guys probably know all of them. I'm guessing you guys definitely know the first one.
No, what is the first one?
Who wants to help out with the first one?
Is it the Discord one?
Yes,
Oh,
that is Discord.
what's the green one with the?
Discord is a popular one. I have a lot of kids on Discord. I had a girl have a meltdown with me last week. She's also on the spectrum, but she was so frustrated that kids are using Snapchat and not Discord, because she said it's so hard to use Snapchat and Discord is so easy. Discord. Do you guys know the second one?
Facebook,
Third one?
Instagram,
Twitter, the new X, which I wasn't a big Twitter person before. YouTube.
Messenger.
Yeah. Yik Yak.
I don't know.
That's a newer one. There's a couple newer ones that we'll touch base on that are apps that are coming up. There's a couple different ones, and they're focused on like being anonymous and meeting people anonymously. Obviously, you know the next one. Yep. Reddit. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. The kids will know these and they'll talk about all the different ones. And it's good to know. I was talking to a dad of a sixth grader last night, and he wasn't aware that his son is a huge Roblox. Roblox tends to be really big with like middle school. Even more so, actually, he taught me something because he told me that he lies to his friends because in sixth grade, you're not supposed to be doing Roblox anymore. You're supposed to be maturing up to Fortnite or a different video game. So he tries to hide it. But we talked about it, and his dad wasn't aware that he's talking to people from all over the country. So his dad wasn't aware that like through this Discord, you're not just, I mean, he's talking to all sorts of people. And when I asked him about it, he wasn't aware that it was possible that somebody could say there's somebody they're not. So there are some things that you just have to be careful of when you're just, I would say, know like what apps and what devices kids are using. If they're on the internet, if it's, you know, do you have parental apps? Are you able to supervise it? Are you able to kind of understand what they're doing, who possibly could be talking to them? So we'll go into that a little bit. Do you guys feel like it's pretty hard to supervise? What would you say the biggest challenge would be?
Like everything is portable, so they don't have to bring them.
Right, right.
And they get their personal iPad and play Roblox, and they get their school Chromebook and video chat with the other kids from their class.
Yeah.
So they're playing on the game with the same guy.
Yeah. Which, and a lot of parents are really happy because they're being social, which is a nice thing, right? So it's not, the social part is nice if they're talking to other kids and that part is going well. What would you guys say, what age do you have to be to have a social media account?
Do you consider Roblox social media?
No, not per se. Not per se, but like for them to sign up for something on their own, like what legally, and I'll tell you why. It could be Roblox. I mean, I don't know what the age is on that one. I'd have to check if that's considered.
Yeah.
On most of these, you have to put in a birth date. So you have to go in, and there's a reason why, and I can kind of, and you guys probably know why that the.
Know every way around it.
So what would you say? What would you say? Like the number, the age is 13, right? So it's 13 to legally be able to have your own social media account, your own YouTube account, your own Snapchat, your own Instagram, and part of that has to do with the privacy protection law that because people can get their information, 13 is the legal age. So under 13, they are not supposed to have an account. So if they are having an account, then they are lying about their birthday if they are not 13. Is that like, you know, as a parent, that's a hard call, right? Like you don't know what to do because they're like, all my friends are doing it and this and that. Just understanding that there's reasons why like some of those laws are in place. And part of it is to protect their information. And so those are good conversations just to have with the kids. So that maybe those are opportunities that you can supervise more, especially before they're 13. So just in terms of at a young age, you know, in terms of when to give kids iPads, when to give them devices, if your child's doing really well and you feel like their social skills are good, they know how to communicate and problem solve, and you're feeling good about where they are, then it's probably a good sign that their relationship with technology is okay, right? And so what you don't want necessarily is you don't want the technology to replace connections and experiences and being able to have relationships. And so that's where it gets a little dicey because I have some kids that are on their technology, but then they really struggle with any kind of socialization. They have a hard time interacting with people in real time. They have a hard time. And so it's not should they have tech or not, it's making sure we're incorporating those other things. Does that make sense?
It does. I just, like my children specifically already struggle with socialization. They already struggle with that. And so there was just this part of my brain that went, this one feed into the other now, because I didn't say, did I give it too young? And they're struggling with socialization
Mhm.
because, or did they already struggle and it's just adding to it?
You know what? It could be both, but there's still things where you can do now. Like it's all, a lot of parents say that too, because I hear a lot, my child doesn't have a lot of friends. This is all they have. What you don't want is you don't want them like by themselves in the room with like, shut away. I mean, I think I had shared this last time. I've been called into situations where I've had adolescents not leaving the room for like 6 months and in their bedroom, like with their video game in their dungeon, and parent is bringing them food and they're completely not functioning. And so obviously that's a concern, as we're going to talk about, of tech addiction. But what you want to do is maybe start incorporating some like social time where they're talking to you, and they're not going to be happy about it probably at first. On most of the cases when I talk to my teenagers about like doing something different with technology or limiting tech, they're not like, great. I mean, there's holes in the wall. I mean, I've been through it all. Like, I know what can happen. A lot of my female and male, both clients and there's also a lot of distorted version of reality. I'm seeing a lot of eating disorders, issues with body image. And so when you think about teaching at a young age, these are opportunities to teach its purpose, right? And so even now, we model for our kids. And so having conversations, teaching, starting to talk about even time limits, talk about, the problem with setting limits is, how many of you tried to set limits with your kids on tech? It sucks because and I have a picture in here for you guys. It's a constant push pull. Like, they will find a way to work around it. And so part of it is we're wanting to make sure that they're having the skills. So younger kids, I see 2 and 3-year-olds walking around with little devices. These are opportunities that maybe that they could have to talk to someone, make eye contact, start to learn some of those basic skills that they need. So if you think about, and I know, how many of you have younger kids? How old? What's the youngest?
18 months.
Oh, 18 months. Well, perfect. So like, this is just something that, we get these kind of similar recommendations a lot. 18 months, they can start kind of watching like a program with a parent. 2 to 5, they talk about, 1 hour or less each weekday. And those are on like little phones or devices or things like that. I always encourage parents to have a little bag with like activities, because I know when you're in a pinch, it's like easy to throw the phone, but like having some kind of like a bag with stuff, they're gonna be conditioned to do what we set them up to do. And so sometimes it's all about just having to build a new habit. Kids 6 to 17, aim for 2 hours or less of like just like mindless screen time. This isn't talking about school and whatnot. 18 and up, 2 to 4 hours, just of like, again, mindless kind of screen time. And I know it's so easy to get to the 2 to 4 hours. It's so easy just to kind of do that. But really what we're trying to work with them on is getting them the skills and helping them to be able to regulate emotions, and start to have a foot in both worlds, right? Like knowing how to connect. I can't tell you how many college kids we have on our caseload that won't go ask a teacher for help. They won't go have a meeting. They're struggling with some of the skills that we're having to go in and kind of teach them and really work with them on. Again, part of it is it's a lot easier to do things, but they need to still be practicing how to do some of these things in person too. So even just practicing with your kids can be good. Practicing helping them deal with anger, helping them be able to, okay, if I'm really frustrated with something, or I have to do a non-preferred task, can I handle doing it without like, shh? And a lot of kids really struggle with this, right? I get called on this a lot too for schools. Student is struggling with non-preferred activity and really has a hard time and shuts down when presented with this. And so we kind of talk about, what do we need to do to help that? And you laugh because could you imagine our parents of like saying non-preferred activity? Right? They would have laughed a little bit. So just kind of knowing your child, like knowing like how are they doing at regulating emotions? How are they doing at being able to manage? You know, a lot of the kids. Again, I had this conversation today. I'm miserable. I'm a freshman in college and I'm so unhappy. Everybody else is having fun and I'm miserable and it sucks for me. Well, why do you know that everyone's having fun? Well, all their stories are telling me they're having fun. Well, do you know just because you post something doesn't mean that's true? And even kids, freshmen in college, have a hard time recognizing that that might not be accurate. Just because I see something on there doesn't mean it's true. So think about where you are developmentally, because whatever they're being exposed to, it's going to start. You guys know, how many of you go on social media, right? So you like something stupid and you get inundated with it. You know, if I'm a 6th grade girl and I put in there, I want to get skinny, I'm going to be inundated now with pictures of skinny and even, you know, diets and all these other things. And I've seen this happen a lot. Then they start to get a very distorted view of kind of what that is going to look like and what that should be. Is all it comes down to is being able to have conversations. And these are good opportunities for us just to talk to our kids. Again, they might not always seem like they're listening, but I'm going to share some ways to have these conversations because they really do. There's things we can do that can help influence some of this stuff at home. So even just down for the younger ones, like 18 months, you know, making sure that imagination, like building forts, like doing some of those things, they're still important. Learning critical thinking, you know, being able to talk to people, volunteer, doing other things to supplement it. So if you're concerned there's a technology issue, maybe bringing in other things, maybe tech-free nights or sometimes where you can do things without the technology. If it is going to be a case where you're going to have really big reactions, there's ways that we can talk to about starting it small. I never encourage like taking devices away or going in and making a huge change because we don't want to do that either. But there's ways we can do it in steps. So how would you say like your kids, if they're old enough, do in these areas? What would you say, which one, like, which one of those would be the hard, like the biggest struggle?
Negotiating and compromise.
Okay.
Introducing themselves
Mhm. Yeah.
in general talking.
Mm-hmm. And these are good ones too. Like if you identify there's one that you would want to work on, it's all about, and I say this to kids all the time, it's not that you're bad or good at something. If there's something you want to improve on, that's something that we can practice. I mean, I can't tell you, I spend probably the first 10 minutes of every single session I have, whether it's like a kid or an adult, just on a greeting, just a greeting. And sometimes it's practicing. Hi, how are you? What's going on? Like just getting them to understand how to greet, how to like, you know, some of those basic things that so many of my kids, and this is like honors AP kids in high school, have such a hard time with. They get so freaked out by like making eye contact and having the conversation. And we also practice conflict resolution. I can't tell you how many people are like, I had this whole fight with my friend and I told them off and I did this and did that. And then you find out it's all in a text, which can be really hard to, so these are just things we can model for them, right? We can model for them. We can kind of, just by modeling, even if they're totally not engaged with you, they will start to pick up on. But in the way, kind of looking at how tech does, tech becomes a little bit of an issue if it's not handled. When you think about different age groups, right? And you think about kids between 10 and 12, and this is a group that I see a lot of the body image stuff starting, concerns about self, But this is really the age, if you think about it, where kids are starting to really get a lot of their identity and confidence through the approval of others. They want to fit in. They want to have what other kids have, and you probably, there's like one thing that gets hot on the marketing market, whether it's a Stanley Cup or it's like a certain body spray, and everybody wants it. You want to be accepted. And it really talks about like our brain receptors, it is impacted. And a lot of these apps and a lot of these games know how to kind of feed off of that. And so that, especially in the preteen age, they can be very sensitive in how they're starting to view themselves and how others respond. And so that's why I think one of the best things Instagram, I think it was Instagram did, where they took it away, where you can't see how many likes you have by somebody else, or it was an option. But for some kids, they're so reliant on feeling empty if they're not getting that constant reassurance and constant approval. So being able to have these conversations and talking to our kids about what they're seeing and about what they're experiencing, and even from your own experiences, can be helpful too for them, as well as helping them understand. And I have the sweetest little girl, but helping her understand you can't videotape other people, like that's not something, we're having conversations about appropriate use of technology, where the boundaries are. Kids don't know. And that's why it's on the responsibility of the parents to know what they're doing and what's happening. If kids are doing something inappropriate on technology, especially if it crosses into illegal, it falls on a lot of times the responsibility of the parents. So just understanding, being able to kind of talk to them about kind of what some of this stuff means. And they might say like, well, all my friends do it. You're being crazy. You're overreacting. But it can be, sending that consistent message and talking to them is going to be important. I would have been a terrible kid with technology. I really would have. And I was a very impulsive kid, and to have something in my hands where I could have like gone on the whole internet, it's interesting. And kids are impressionable. My daughter, my oldest one, is 26, turning 27, and she's like a professional. And she was so mortified when she was looking for jobs after graduate school, because when she was in 6th grade, she had a picture, and it was totally like innocent. There was some stupid movie where they were like driving the camper around, Jennifer Aniston, I think. And they put, did you guys see that movie, No Regrets, across the chest? Okay. And it was like spelled backwards or something. He spelled it wrong. So she was like wearing a bikini, and it was like no regrets, a tattoo, like a fake one. She's a kid. And she was like, ugh. And somehow that picture went through Pinterest and like got like was all over the internet. So when you Google her name, which is what we do when we have job searches, you right away Google and you find, and that's the picture that was coming up. She luckily doesn't have like a bad past, but like she works in education. No, she's a school social worker, and she's amazing. But it was like, that was their first time to realize like, holy cow, I need to be careful. Like she couldn't get it down. I mean, I think it took her like 2 years. And again, that was the case of being too young to understand posting a picture of what can happen. So those are the things that we just have to be mindful about when we're talking. So if your child has a healthy relationship with technology, right? Are they sleeping okay? Do they have any sleep issues? I mean, that's a big one I run into a lot. A lot of the kids that come to me, oh, well, I have a sleep issue, and they're not falling asleep till 2 a.m. and they're getting up at 11 every day. That's not a sleep issue. That's you need to go to bed earlier. We need to it's a sleep issue, but usually there's technology somewhere involved in that, and they're getting ramped up at night and they're having a hard time. I have some kids that sneak out of bed to go downstairs and play. I have other kids that have devices hidden in their pillows and seriously in their beds. And, parents are taking one device away and another device pops up, and pretty soon their device has been taken out of their, are they eating, nutrition, exercise? Are they getting some movement, right? It's fine if they go home and play after school, but are they active at school? Are they getting some movement? You know, do they have some friends that they can hang out with, like one or two? Are they in an activity at school? Like, can they have conversations with other people? If they really can at all, then you want to kind of bring in some more connection. You know, we want kids and adults to be able to feel good about walking into a situation and having a conversation. You can also say really mean things to each other on the internet. I have a lot of really mean things being said on Discord and things like that. We're best friends, and sometimes those relationships can go really close really fast. Like, this is my best friend, or we're in love, or we're dating, and you guys have been together for 2 days on the internet. But those, sometimes when it's time to have a breakup, they can get really nasty. You know, how is your child doing emotionally? You know, are they able to regulate emotions and kind of manage some of that stuff? You know, are they doing okay in school? Like, you know, this is the checklist I usually start to talk about when we talk about kind of where the level of concern is over the technology. If they're doing well in those areas, you still want to supervise based on the age and be, you know, appropriate with that. But if you're concerned about some of these things, then it's time we can start to talk about, okay, what maybe needs to happen different. I've had some families that have said, we're just going to have the technology not be in the bedroom. We're going to have it not be like where everything's like in the room and we don't see them for days on end. And you might not want to see them for days on end at some points, right? I mean, let's be real. I mean, we all want a break. We're human. Not every parent is like, wow, I can't wait to spend time with my child. The kids are hard, right? And so we get that. But, you know, if you have, I had a girl, she was in 7th grade, and mom said she's talking about depression and self-harm. She brought her to me, and one of the interventions we did was the mom said, I'm concerned about how you're doing. You're not functioning well. I'm concerned about your sadness and statements you're saying. So I'm going to have technology is only going to be in the family room, and you can have any of your devices down in the family room, but I will be down there too. She was mad. She stormed off. She swore at her mom, said she hated her, said all these things. But then 2 weeks later, 4 weeks later, she reported feeling a lot better because she was getting time with her parent and with the family. And she was wanting her technology back too. So that was motivating her. So sometimes just isolating it, changing it where it is in the house can be a thing. Sometimes just saying, and I have a lot of parents that do that as like discipline. You know what? I'm going to give you a choice. If you continue, there's no technology for, 24 hours, or the technology is going to be moved. But again, if you have a child that you know it's going to be a battle, then we got to do some different things. Just some statistics. We know there's a lot more, and the numbers are probably higher. We're seeing a lot of children and teens more with anxiety and depression, seeing a lot more ADHD diagnoses come through, a lot more autism screenings in this area. So we're seeing a lot more autism, a lot more ADHD. It's not from technology, but it's just something that we're starting to keep an eye on. And so, this stuff has increased more recently. And so it also found that video gaming and non-academic computer use among U.S. adolescents for 5 hours or more was associated with more depression, suicidal behavior, and even being bullied. So different things like that. So just knowing if you have a child that's more prone to mental health issues, it might even be that child might be impacted differently. They might crave it more. They might get more ramped up and have a harder time, and that can translate over to school where something happens and they're highly reactive and have a big response where maybe the response should have been a lot lower. Do you guys have any questions? And these are some of the things that we are seeing with our kids that I treat a lot with children and adolescents. And again, technology has a purpose. We use it even in treatment. There's a lot of really healthy things that can come out. I think it's a good opportunity for parents and kids to sit together and learn about what they're doing, play a game if it's a game, learn about the app they're on. Sometimes we do have to set limits on it, which is always hard because if you have a child that you try to set a limit, maybe you have a child that has ADHD and depression, and you go to set a limit, and this is very common. They punch holes, they start screaming, they threaten, and they might threaten themselves. These are starting to teeter on signs of tech addiction, what we call. And so, but those responses can be very normal when you have kids that are very, very tied into the electronics. And so that's where you have to gauge. I mean, if you get that big of a reaction where you're concerned about safety, we always want to err on the side of caution and get an assessment. But there are things, and whenever you're trying to change a routine in the house, things might get worse before they get better. So if you really are like, I want to change things, but you know that you have kids that are going to just explode the minute you touch any of their devices, you might want to sit down with someone at the school or like the pediatrician or their counselor and have a conversation around that. It's not easy though. I mean, it gets harder the older they get. So the kids I have that are like 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 that are in that boat are a lot harder than the kids that are in middle school and elementary school. So the longer it goes on, the harder it is to intervene, and we have a harder time. Also want to see how their engagement with school is. Are they thriving in school? And that's something you can say to them. You know, if you're doing what you need to do, then you can, this is something that you can have, and you can demonstrate that you can have your own like supervision if you're of age. But if I'm having to wake you up in the morning and beg you to go to school and drag you out of bed and all these things, then we have to have a conversation about it. Parents will tell me a lot. They feel sorry for their kids. They don't want to put boundaries on the devices because they feel sorry that their kids don't have a lot of fun, like enjoyment. My son's really depressed. This is his only way to make him happy. He has no friends. School's really painful for him. It's hard though, because it can be more of an interference than anything if we're not like prioritizing the healthy part first. Because when you're in the middle of an addiction, whether it's a substance abuse addiction or a tech addiction, you're going to say whatever you can to get that thing that you're addicted to, right? And so you're going to rationalize, you're going to barter. And that's a lot of times what our kids are doing with us when there's an issue. Just really, there's a lot of research out, and I'm not going to bore just because of time, but it really talks about how we are impacted and the importance of like moderation. Also talking about, feeling lonely, even though I could be on a gaming device or social media, and I could be on social media for 3 hours tonight, I'm not going to feel more connected. I'm going to feel worse about myself, most likely, and I'm going to feel possibly lonely, right? And that's what a lot of the research, how many of you guys like feel better and more connected when you're on a social media app for like hours on end? You just see how everybody else is doing so well, right? And everyone's so happy, and that's what our kids are seeing. So it talks about that the desire to have connection with you, desire to have connection with a teacher, desire to have connection with peers. And so again, is the social media, is the games helping? It could. There are kids that probably feel more connected because they're playing with other kids, and that's a good thing. We just have to make sure it's kind of boundaries and having some moderation around it. Because again, if your child's not doing well and they're like locked up in the room, not showering and not eating, then we have a concern. Or if, for our young people that are seeing a lot of these apps, talking to them about what's real and what's not. I had a friend, she has a therapy practice, and she put, I saw their homepage with all the therapist pictures. And I was like, holy crap, like all these therapists look amazing. They're like, they're 20 years younger. They've like, wow, they're like super women. Like these people look amazing. What are they doing? What do you think they were doing? Yeah, they were all fake photos. I mean, they were all, somehow they AI'd all the photos. So I know they're all they're all wonderful looking people, but these pictures did not depict what they really look like in real life. These pictures depict people that have like gone through some kind of machine and come out 20 years younger looking amazing. But I wouldn't know that if I was a consumer, and it doesn't really matter in this context, but but our kids see this stuff all the time. This is what,
I'm sorry. How do you explain to your child, like, he's playing Fortnite and he's playing with his friends from school, and I can hear what's going on. I know that he's just with this small group. There's like 4 or 5 of them at the most, because they're on their phones talking to one another while they're playing the game with one another. So at least I know who he's playing with. But how do you get him to understand, because he does have DMDD, that his mental status is different than his friends, and what may not affect his friends, I can see affecting him. Because I don't want him to feel like he's different, per se.
well, I think like you can have your own rules in the house. I mean, every kid's going to say that's not fair. So-and-so's parents let them do whatever they want. That's not fair. Everybody can do what they want. But think about kind of what you feel like is appropriate time. You know, when your schoolwork's done, some parents like have a visual expectations going to school, schoolwork's done. When you've done your expectations, you can have your 2 hours. So you can, a lot of parents set it on the phone. You can set them on, there's like ways you can do it on your phone. And I have a list of those in the back. But it really is about just laying out what the expectations are. And you don't even have to, like, probably with him, I wouldn't go into a whole like huge explanation about him being different. But you can say, you haven't been doing your homework. I have a lot of little kids that aren't doing their homework. I don't know why right now I have a lot of middle schoolers not doing their homework. And the other thing I see that can come up a little bit too is lying. I see a lot of like, I didn't do it. I just saw you do it. Or I did my homework. I'm done. You know, where is it? It's in the iPad. I turned it in. Oh, the teacher did, you know, you see all that stuff. So explaining, you know, you didn't do your homework. You know, I'm struggling getting you up. When I see these things, then you can have more freedom. Like I use it as leverage. When you're showing me more independence, then you can have more. And sometimes we just kind of explain it. Again, if you're concerned about it turning into like a power struggle, or you're concerning about someone getting really aggressive or a safety issue, then you're going to have some help with the conversations. Because a lot of times by the time they get to me, there are safety issues that come into play. And this is kind of what we talk about. Technology addiction refers to the uncontrollable urge or impulse to continue using technology to the point that it will interfere with your mental, physical, and social life. And this can be being on the internet, video games, gambling is another one. Internet addiction, internet use disorder. This is very common with a lot of ages across the board. And again, it's what we're seeing with their reactions. We're seeing with, in this picture, tell me if you've ever felt this picture. So this is something that I deal with a lot, where things get really heated. Probably 5 to 7 times a day I get calls on this, with kids not going to school or not doing what they should be doing, and they're really obsessing over wanting their technology, wanting their internet. So this is common. So if you're seeing these kinds of things, it is maybe a warning sign that there might be a possible problem that, again, maybe consult with the school counselor or the pediatrician and just kind of see, how is it interfering with my child? It's not easy. Again, I know these are some things too. You know, safety is a big one. Just understanding safety, understanding who they could possibly be talking to, because you want to be careful about that. You know, sex trafficking, drug trafficking. I mean, I hate to say it, that comes through Snapchat and Instagram usually. So those are the apps that they target the younger kids through. So they need to understand who they're talking to, what they're buying, when they're putting their personal information in, just being able to monitor what they're doing. Naked pictures, they need to understand. I mean, it sounds silly, but you know, when you're a kid, you don't understand the legality of some of this stuff. You don't understand what it means. You're lonely. You finally find a friend on the internet. You might make choices that aren't the best. And so just understanding what that all means and kind of some of the parameters and some of the things that can happen. Do you guys have any questions? The kids that when you start talking to them about this stuff, they know a lot of this stuff. They're aware of a lot of this stuff. They just, some of them can be very naive that it could happen to them. And so just being careful, especially I'm always careful when I have kids that are feeling very lonely or isolated, what they're doing on the internet too, because the more time you spend on that, just understanding, again, real world versus fantasy world. And we talk a lot about confidence. And so what I do with kids is I take them in and we try to like work on building relationships. We try to work on even going into stores and talking to people, making eye contact, problem solving things, losing things in a store and having to go get help. Like we're constantly trying to role play and act a lot of this stuff out because it makes a huge difference. You want your kids to feel confident that they can start to stand up for themselves, even in situations where other kids aren't being very nice to them in person. So we talked about this a little bit. And again, a lot of adults have this too. So I talk a lot with parents. If you have a tech issue yourself, maybe that's a great place to start because a lot of the parents I work with they also recognize that the phones or gaming can be an issue. And so if I've had to really do that, I've had to be really careful because I don't get anything out of my phone typically if I'm swiping. So I've really had to try not to just endlessly do it, especially when I'm with my family, because it's so easy to do and you don't even realize it. And sometimes it's like just an empty escape. But what it can do is make you more stressed out. These are, if you have, again, any of these symptoms from your kids, if these are the things that you see, you're not alone. This is very common, but it's a sign that, maybe don't do things the same way, try different. If we do something different, we'll get something different. If they are aggressive, it is common that kids may say that I'm going to hurt myself if you take this away. If you hear those statements that someone's actually saying that, you want to take that seriously and treat that like that's a threat and call their counselor, call for an intervention if that's what they're saying. And I would say to them, if this is what you're saying to me, then we have to take it seriously. What do you guys think is the biggest, the scariest part about setting some boundaries on this stuff with kids?
The fighting, the yelling.
Mm-hmm.
And even when it's taken away or boundaries are set, I don't know where it comes from. It's like this magical device will show up in the house,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be a tablet that we forgot we had, or a phone that came from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
They're slick.
Mm-hmm.
They really
They are
are.
slick. They are
The older
slick.
they get, the slicker they are.
They are slick.
It's pretty sad when you have to ask your 11-year-old grandson, "Hey, how do I do this?" And he's like,
Yeah, it is hard. And that's the hardest part is because we are, and again, I listed the parent apps in the end, the supervision apps, just understanding kind of what they're doing, what kind of chat rooms they might be in, being able to monitor what they're seeing is going to be important too. And the biggest thing is, with this is having your expectations, and they can be really simple for kids at home. Especially if you have a child that is more difficult to rein in, which a lot of times ends up being the most successful young adults. But having basic expectations, and instead of focusing on, I'm taking your tech away, there's basic expectations that we have in this house. When you're meeting those, you can have extra time on this. Because chances are, I'm guessing you guys are all paying for the devices and the Wi-Fi, right? Mostly. So, the Wi-Fi can be a good conversation to have too. I did have one parent, and I know this is lying, so I shouldn't be advertising it, but she said, I can't afford the Wi-Fi bill, sorry. And she kind of made that up. But it was funny to see the kids' reactions because the kids weren't mad at her, the parent. They were frustrated, but it was because that was the parent's biggest concern. If it's me, they're going to follow me around the house. They're going to banter me. I've had parents say, Jackie took your electronics. They're with her. Go talk to her. I don't love that one either. But it is sometimes giving them a little bit of a break and being able to talk to them. just I studied a lot this social psychologist, and she talked about, and this hit home because a lot of the teenagers I work with, and I hear this all the time. Why is that kid here in counseling? They'll see each other in the waiting room. That kid has it all together. That kid should be happy. I have a lot of parents and young people that just talk about feeling very lonely and feeling like they're not as connected as they would like to be to others. And this particular part of research talks a lot about how you start to feel empty when you're so on the social media so much and wanting the validation from others and wanting to appear a certain way, that you're not having those opportunities for like the real stuff, and realizing that everyone, struggles with things, and we're all can be insecure at times, but social media doesn't always depict that. And so these are conversations we're having a lot. I think the movie that's coming out, I know we're hosting it somewhere not that far. I think it's like Screenagers Part 2. Did you guys ever see that movie? It was like a big movie, Screenagers, that came out. It was, it was probably 5 years ago that I hosted a bunch of screenings, but then there's another Part 2, Screenagers something, but we're going to have it. I think we're going to be hosting it in Barrington at the Barrington High School in November. But it's just a documentary, and I think you can bring your kids to it if they would go. But it's a movie, and it talks all about like technology, and a lot of times we'll have like dialogue and conversation after the movie. But it's interesting that when you hear from some of the middle schoolers and even high schoolers and even elementary, that they will talk about how this impacts them. When you have conversations and you get them in a rational place and you're having conversations, they're pretty honest. I mean, they're not like, it's amazing, it's wonderful, life's great. They will talk about the challenges of it and how it can be really hard and how it can be frustrating for them. So that's the good part. They do have the awareness. And these are the things too that I would say, and I know when Fortnite first came out, the biggest issue with Fortnite that got so many kids addicted is because it was in those short like time periods, and it was just the right amount of time where you felt like, I'm sure you guys hear that, I have to finish my game, I have to finish my tournament, I have to finish my this is serious tonight, because I have a kid that still isn't going to college because he is finishing a tournament. Some of these tournaments can go from 1 day to 6 years, I'm telling you. So you have to just be careful, but it is about helping them like kind of detach. So adding in more stuff, adding in more opportunities for some different, and volunteering is a good thing. If you can get your kids volunteering, getting your kids, doing something physical. It gets harder and harder as they get older to get them to agree to doing different things. I know that. Have any of you guys had any luck getting your kids out of the house? What helps you?
Like my son, he mows the lawn for our neighbors.
That's nice. How old is he? That's nice. That's awesome. And even getting them doing something like that, hopefully he gets paid something?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to say.
It was, the whole idea was to make sure that he doesn't sit and play something, just to kick him out of the house.
Yeah,
move
yeah,
him,
yeah,
And but he loves it. So
yeah. That's good.
He gets money, so
That's good.
it's a win-win.
Yeah, yeah. And you can even say it's money for Roblox if that's what they need, or because they usually need money for the video games, right? Yeah, this was high. And I realized when I first saw this, I was like, this is so high. And then I looked at I looked at my, like how much I was on. I'm like, I could see somebody being on it for that much time. I know I got to whip through some of this stuff. The best thing we can do is we model. So even if you have to, force your child to go to dinner with you, just model having a conversation. Try not to have your devices on. The earlier you can start, the better, but just having some opportunities for tech-free time. A lot of families are talking about not having, dinner and meals as much because everyone's busy. But those are times, anytime you can get the child to engage in a conversation and to be able to talk to you. And sometimes if you have a really hard time relating to your child for whatever reason, you can use tech in your favor and message them and talk to them, because a lot of kids do better with reading instead of hearing. Those are positive things you can do, learning about what they're doing, learning about what they like about it, trying to ask what they like about it. What need is it fitting for them? I was never a video gamer, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't my thing. But I know a lot of like friends I have and parents like their video games. And sometimes kids will say to me, yeah, you're telling me not to play. What about this one? And they're pointing to their parent. If you can, planning like some kind of boundaries, a schedule around it. You can do a lot of this on your phone. There are ways and there are apps to limit screen time. I have some parents that will turn it off during the school day. They won't allow kids to be on apps and device. Talking to someone if you need help, like a professional, about setting some limits for your child. And this is one too, is just talking about the reality of, again, focusing on what you're concerned about they're missing out on versus making it all about the technology. I'm concerned because of school, you're not making it to school. Well, school's stupid. Well, I'm concerned that we need to focus on this before. Most of my school refusal kids, I would say it probably didn't start off this way. Most of my school refusal kids, even if they're just pure anxiety, our tech addiction is falling in, that they're consumed with the tech when they're not in school or not engaging in school. So when I look at school engagement, a lot of times technology is a part of that. Obviously there's a lot of positive things about it. We like that these are all the different things. There's great art stuff, and it's a way to gain relationships with people that like what you like. There's so many like family games. I know there's a family game we play. It's not like social media, but it's I want to say it's called, I probably shouldn't say what it's called, but it's called Jack something. I'll just say that. And it's like an interactive game where it's questions and all different games, and it's fast moving, and we play as a family on holidays. And like some of that stuff is really fun. Just knowing what the purpose is, what it's being used for. The only other thing I would say, if you have a child, like an anxious child or a child, like avoid texting them all the time. Try not to text kids when they're at school. I don't ever think that's typically helpful. Really encourage them to go to the nurse or go to the social worker if they need something. Again, we're wanting to encourage them to use their skills, to gain skills, to learn how not to rely just on parents. A lot of times parents might be anxious and they're texting their kids all day. How are you? What do you need? Do you need anything? Not super helpful when they're should be doing something else. Definitely you can send positive messages, hope you have a good day. Can't wait to hear about what happened. Try to avoid nagging through text messaging. Privacy, it's age. Again, privacy is, you don't want to be reading everything your kids are doing when they're in high school, but you also want to have parameters. So there are, I'm going to just go to here. These are just some. There's a lot more. This is not my 100% specialty, but I know these are apps that have been recommended to me in terms of being able to do some supervision. Your district probably knows more. These are some of the ones, having time limits. Talk to your phone provider, talk to your Wi-Fi provider. I know there's some, like Granger for a while was making outlet locks where you could actually lock the outlet. There's all kinds, because you don't want to get into a physical altercation with your kids. That's never helpful. So trying to establish some boundaries. Don't do it in the midst of a power struggle. Establishing those boundaries when everyone's calm. Write them down, and then give them some time to understand these are the expectations. Move through it. Don't just be reactive and go in there and yank stuff out, because that's just going to cause a physical blow up. So having conversations, supervision, helping them to kind of understand how tech influences you, how it influences them, and allow them to kind of talk about it. If you have concerns with their mental health around this, I think talking to somebody at the school or like a therapist would be helpful. For kids, I'm not a huge fan of the virtual therapy and counseling unless your children are engaged. If they've been seeing a virtual counselor for a long time and they're not seeing progress, you might have to find somebody in person. I get that question a lot. That also can be hard because a lot of times kids are playing games while they're on the appointments. And so You have to just see, is this working? And that's kind of my motto. Is what we're doing working? If it's working, great. The proof is in the pudding. If it's not working, let's not keep doing it. Let's try to do something different.
What do you mean by many physical complaints?
Not feeling well, the somatic complaints?
Oh, okay.
Where was it?
It just said many physical complaints. I was just curious.
Oh. I have to go back and look at that. Sorry, I think I ran us a little bit over and I wanted to save time for questions. Do you guys have